FIBA Women's World Cup in Berlin. Team USA, one of the most dominant forces in international sports. 8 straight Olympic gold medals.
3 minutes and 5 points. That's a warning sign, not a delayed start. The U.S. women's national basketball team looked unbeatable on paper as they entered a FIBA World Cup qualifier in San Juan, but they appeared to be stuck on the ground. No urgency, no rhythm, and no spacing. At last, the bench shifted. When Caitlin Clark arrives, everything falls apart. Not slowly, not courteously, not right away. A few minutes ago, the offense appeared to be frozen, but now it is moving at a new pace. Sharper passes, quicker decision-making, and possession after possession that becomes too much for the defense to handle. And the question instantly changes from what's wrong with Team USA to something much more awkward. When she's not on the floor, what precisely happens? Proof for 3 minutes. Because context is important, allow me to properly establish the scenario. In the FIBA World Cup qualification campaign, this was the third match for the United States. Kara Lawson, the head coach, was not present. Assistant coach Nate Tibbetts was in charge for March Madness as she had returned to Duke to complete her academic responsibilities. The veterans Kalia Copper, Chelsea Gray, Eureka Hamby, Ryan Howard, and Jackie Young made up the starting lineup. Each and every one of these basketball players is outstanding. Years of professional success, championship pedigrees, and all-star selections. Additionally, their offense was ineffective throughout the opening 3 minutes of the match against Italy. Legendary floor general Chelsea Gray, who has won numerous titles and has one of the highest basketball IQs in the game, was in charge of a system that was just too slow, too predictable, and too dependent on half-court sets that foreign defenses had spent decades learning to read and disrupt. The Italian defense was packing the paint, occupying a small area, and challenging the Americans to outshoot them while obstructing every passing window and drive channel. Additionally, the conventional lineup was falling into a trap. No one attacked or sliced as the ball swung back and forth. The defense was not compelled to rotate, recover, or panic. It was basketball from a textbook. Additionally, playing textbook basketball on a global scale yields textbook results. In other words, mediocre ones. The most talented team in the tournament scored 5 points in 3 minutes against a side that the U.S. should be destroying from the first possession. This is when things start to get interesting. While observing this from the sidelines, Nate Tibbetts took action that Kara Lawson had been hesitant to take. He took the sensible course of action. He called Caitlin Clark's number 3 minutes into the first quarter after looking past the seniority structure, the political hierarchy, any internal agreements regarding veteran minutes and rotation procedures, a slow offense, and an immobile scoreboard. Not when it's customary to expect substitutions at the 5-minute mark. Clark makes a three-pointer. Too much room. There are almost 10 million viewers. We might be able to surpass that 10 this year. 3 minutes. It's a panic replacement. In real time, the coaching staff is acknowledging that the starting lineup isn't working. And everything changed the instant Clark set foot on that hardwood. The transformation. I need you to realize how statistically ridiculous the next events were. The statistics seem almost like a data input error because they are so severe. After Caitlin Clark joined the game, Team USA scored 23 points in the final 6.5 minutes of the first quarter. 23. By the end of the quarter, the team had increased from 5 points in 3 minutes to 28 points. The offense didn't get better with time. On a chilly morning, it did not warm up like an engine. It exploded instantly. The entire geometry of the court stretched to its breaking point the instant Clark touched the basketball. This is the reason. For the first 3 minutes, the Italian defense was comparatively at ease. A truncated scheme was being played. Hands in the passing lanes, bodies in the paint, challenging the Americans to make contested mid-range leaps. And because the conventional lineup did not penalize them for it, that plan was effective. There was no one on the ground posing a 30-foot shooting hazard. They were not being forced to apply defensive pressure outside of the three-point range. Thus, they remained little. They remained at ease. They maintained their authority. In roughly 15 seconds, Clark deleted everything. The Italian coaching staff faced a fresh issue as soon as she joined the game. A dilemma for which no defensive playbook on the world has a clear solution. At 30 feet, Caitlin Clark cannot be left unguarded. You are unable to. With the mechanical accuracy of an unfailing sniper, she will pull up from the logo and drain it. The Italian defenders had to expand as a result. They had to extend their defensive pressure beyond the arc, to a distance of 30 feet, and to a point where the defensive structure behind them was severely weakened. And the moment they increased that pressure, the Team USA offense transformed into an entirely new machine. Observe the particular item that brought everything together. The ball is in Clark's possession at the top of the key. All eyes in the Italian defense are fixed on her. They are looking forward to the deep three. They are looking forward to the pick and roll. Haley Clark emerges from the depths. Deep three. However, Clark does something that sets exceptional point guards apart from mediocre ones. She uses her eyes to influence the defense. She glances in one direction, then moves on. Along the baseline, she creates a tiny window of vulnerability. The easiest shot in basketball is a layup at the rim, which Clark makes with ease after a teammate cuts back door and he delivers a pass that totally avoids the defensive rotation. Produced by the player's gravity when gripping the ball 30 feet away, not by the cutter. When casual onlookers discuss Clark, they overlook this. They believe she is a one-trick show pony after seeing the logo 3 times and the highlight passes. A volume shooter who hopes for the best when throwing from a distance. However, the game film repeatedly shows a player who is deliberately altering the defense's geometry. She's not merely shooting. She's making shots. For everyone in her immediate vicinity as well as for herself. When she plays chess, the defense is always one step behind her and arrives at the attack position just a split second too late, stuck responding to her final move. The score was 28-14 at the completion of the first quarter. In the minutes following Clark's arrival, the United States had outscored Italy 23-9. The machine was humming, the fog had cleared, and the Italian defense appeared to have been blended. Shift in the global game. The second and third quarters served as the control group if the first quarter was Caitlin Clark's argument. Because the coaching staff did what they typically do during the game. They went back to their customary cycles. They put their generational spark down, probably to give the veterans their minutes and to give her some rest. And the outcome was a tactical catastrophe. The offense declined right away. Not instantly, not gradually, not slowly. The driving lanes disappeared as the ball's motion slowed. Grinding, fiercely contested, low-percentage possessions that felt like pulling teeth took the place of the transition. Opportunities that had been flooding in throughout the first quarter. The Italian defense was able to compress once again in the absence of Clark's gravitational pull expanding the floor. The paint was packed. They blocked the lanes that went by. With its most explosive playmaker gone, the American offense was unable to respond as they turned every possession into a battle. In the second and third quarters, Team USA outscored Italy by a mere 7 points without Caitlin Clark on the court. 7. The offense appeared disoriented, slow, and disjointed in 2 full quarters of basketball against Italy, a team that the United States was expected to destroy. Players will receive a portion of WNBA earnings under a revolutionary collective bargaining agreement signed just last month. Dependent on individual bravery as opposed to a unified, seamless system. It was precisely the kind of basketball that leaves a team open to a huge upset on the global scene. It's the kind of basketball where a disciplined, laser-focused European team defeats you while you can't develop your own strategy. It was like witnessing 2 completely different basketball teams wearing identical jerseys because of how striking the contrast was. Team USA was an offensive powerhouse when Clark was on the floor. Quick, imaginative, erratic, and open to all other possessions. Without her, they were a group of gifted people repeatedly running into the same defensive wall in the hopes that their potential would overcome the lack of a system. That's how talent may win games throughout the regular season. World Cups are not something it can win. This fact is more clearly stated by Connor and the stats than by any commentator. With a plus 27 rating at the end of the game, Clark had the highest rating of any player on the team. A disproportionate amount of the devastation occurred during Clark's playing time in a game that was ultimately decided by 34 points. Team USA led Italy by 27 points when she was playing. The Americans were virtually playing Italy to a close tie when she sat down. That is not a small difference. That's what separates a squad that rules the world from one that barely makes it. Whether on purpose or out of desperation, The coaching staff eventually unleashed the lineup that the entire basketball world had been clamoring to witness during the fourth quarter clinic and the actual fourth quarter. Kelsey Plum, Paige Bueckers, and Caitlin Clark are all simultaneously on the ground. Sharing the court, pushing the pace, causing mayhem, and feeding off each other's genius are three of the best offensive players in women's basketball history. What came next was a master lecture on what occurs when you quit controlling egos and start maximizing talent, not just on shooting, passing, or individual skill. 24 points throughout the fourth quarter. The Italian defense was unable to control the offense, which was a blur of movement, cutting, screening, and precise passing. However, two particular scenes from this quarter are particularly noteworthy because they tell more than just the tale of a basketball game. They demolish narratives that have been contaminating the conversation about this team for several months. The isolation sequence comes first. This sequence is your everlasting, unquestionable refutation of any criticism that Caitlin Clark is a one-dimensional player who depends only on the three-point shooting and is unable to break down a defender off the dribble. An Italian defender is playing tight, muscular, textbook defense while Clark is alone on the fringe. With a swift, forceful crossover behind the back, Clark completely stops the defender's movement. To regain her flow, she smoothly switches to a between-the-legs dribble. Then she abruptly stops, lifts herself, and makes a turnaround fadeaway jumper. History of college basketball. Caitlin Clark made history with this shot. Right in the face of the defender. The mechanics are perfect. The footwork is flawless. The defender hardly raises a hand because the release happens so quickly. She empties it. And the shot destroys the Guardian's spirit. Because it doesn't matter whether you play textbook flawless defense. In either case, the ball is going in. That isn't an expert in three-point shooting. At the pinnacle of her abilities, that is a comprehensive, multifaceted offensive weapon. Second, and this is the one that ought to put an end to the Angel Reese sequence, the most poisonous story in women's basketball. The internet has been fixated on creating a rivalry between Clark and Reese for months that goes beyond antagonism to include personal hostility. We've heard several rumors about conflict in the locker room, passive-aggressive body language, and a team's inability to get along. The conversation has been tiresome, simplistic, and largely unfounded. Watch the tape from the fourth quarter. Caitlin Clark's screen is set by Angel Reese. It's a hard, physical, bone-rattling screen that totally destroys the perimeter defender, not a sloppy, going-through-the-motions screen. The nasty job is done by her. She gives her body as a sacrifice. She makes room. Recognizing the gift, Clark unleashes an absolute missile from logo range and performs her famous step-back motion, fading to her left to create an ocean of separation. Angel Reese is clearly thrilled when the ball breaks through the goal. She pumps her fist in celebration. Sincere feelings, sincere regard, and United States won by 34 points. Clark's on-court effect accounted for over three-quarters of the final margin. Team USA was an apex predator when she was on the floor, ruthless, effective, and totally in control. While she was off the court, the squad was destroying a qualifying opponent in a competitive dogfight that didn't resemble a powerhouse. These figures are made much more startling by the larger context. Clark played his third competitive basketball match in 8 months against Italy. Her WNBA season ended early due to a groin strain that had kept her out of action since July 2025. Between mid-July and mid-March, she hadn't played a single minute of competitive basketball. Rust for 8 months. In her third game back, she recorded an 80% shooting clip, 102% true shooting, a plus 27 impact rating, and single-handedly turned a stagnated offense into a 93-59 blowout after 8 months away from game speed, game toughness, and game pressure. She was not going to ease back in. The cobwebs were not leaving her. From the minute she took the floor, she was playing at the very top of her offensive capabilities. She was also voted tournament MVP at the conclusion of the qualifying competition. MVP. Competitions with Caitlin Clark. Leading the Americans to a 210-point scoring differential and a 5-0 record. It is not appropriate for that player to come off the bench. That player doesn't have to wait for her turn. On the first possession of the game, that player ought to have the ball in her hands. 3 minutes into the Italy match, the temporary coaching staff saw it. When Nate Tibbetts realized there was a crisis, he hit the panic button and added the player that prevented the team from becoming stagnant. However, playing your best player shouldn't ever need a crisis. A 5-point drought against Italy should never be necessary. Italy needs to acknowledge that your conventional lineup is out of date. As the World Cup in Berlin draws near, the international competition will become much more competitive. Greetings. We are aware that we will be put to the test, but how can we work together to create some synergy? There will be less room for error. There will be more advanced defense strategies. The physical tasks will be more taxing. Additionally, the coaching staff must stop managing the political hierarchy, stop worrying about seniority, and give the offensive keys to the player who has earned them with every statistic, every game tape review, and every honor in every on-court transformation this qualifying tournament produced if Team USA is to ensure dominance on the world stage. And it's important to keep in mind the purpose of this qualifying competition. By winning the 2025 FIBA America, the United States had already secured their place in the World Cup. Theoretically, these Puerto Rico games offered a chance to try out several lineups. Take on Puerto Rico, the host nation, Team USA. Danilo Gallinari joins me, Kelsey Wright-Johnson. Establish rapport and incorporate younger players into the system. However, experiments are only worthwhile if you get knowledge from them. Additionally, the lesson from the Italy match and the tournament as a whole is shouting so loudly that it should be impossible to ignore. With Caitlin Clark leading the offense, every lineup combination results in historically effective, dominant basketball. Without her, every combination results in something much worse. The sample size has grown. 5 games. 5 victories. An MVP award for the tournament and a 210-point difference. The 2025 WNBA Finals trophy will now be presented. An experiment eventually yields a conclusion, and that conclusion has been reached. This concludes the experiment. The information has been received. There is a unanimous decision. The movie slows down, yet the suspense doesn't go away. Because the United States women's national basketball team's recent performance is more than just a lineup debate. When pressure, legacy, and performance come together on the same floor, it raises structural questions about how top basketball selections are truly made. On the one hand, you have years of experience, championship pedigree, and trust. Athletes that have carried teams, closed games, and earned their spot at the top level via consistency include Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, and Kalia Copper. You have something more difficult to overlook on the other side. A change in pace as soon as Caitlin Clark joins the game. Reconfiguring spacing, attention, and defensive behavior in real time is just as important as passing or scoring. Under the weight of a single decision-maker controlling the floor's design, multinational defenses are forced to rotate earlier, collapse more quickly, and eventually collapse. And it ceases to be theoretical if you witness that contrast on tape. Because it is not softened by the numbers. It is not reinterpreted by the plus-minus. There is no space for doubt in the possession-by-possession breakdown. When she's on the court, the offense gets quicker, cleaner, and more dangerous. When she's not, it becomes much more predictable. However, this is where the narrative starts to seem awkward. Because this level of basketball is never just basketball. There is a hierarchy. It's trust. It's continuity. It is the contrast between the visible pressure of performance under the sport's brightest lights and the invisible weight of seniority. These two groups are currently at odds over a single Berlin decision. Do you totally support the athlete who seems to bend international competition around her style of play, or do you maintain the framework that developed the program? Because once that decision is made, it is not limited to a single tournament. It establishes a standard. It establishes a path. When everything is at stake, it lets each player in that locker room know what matters most. And somewhere in that choice, Team USA basketball's future subtly changes. Thus, what the recording depicts is no longer the question. When the recording is no longer available for interpretation and the repercussions cannot be postponed any longer, watch what they do. When the next elimination game takes place in Berlin, will they finally become what the numbers already indicate they are, or will they continue to be what they have always been? Sincere collaboration. This is the appearance of championship basketball. It's not two superstars acting as though they don't exist. It is two incredibly gifted players realizing that when they combine their unique talents, they can create something unstoppable. Reese supplies the screens, the boards, the inside toughness, and the physical enforcement. Clark offers the potential to punish any defensive error from wherever on the floor, as well as the deadly long-range execution, vision, and shooting. No defensive strategy in the world, not even Italy's, can contain those two players when they are working together in the pick-and-roll or dribble handoff. The last piece of proof was the fourth-quarter transition game. The fast break turns into a weapon of mass destruction when Clark is on the floor and a defensive rebound is obtained. In one particular scenario, Kiki Iriafin collects a contested defensive rebound, finds Clark right away, and makes the outlet pass. The Italian defense is undermined the moment the ball comes into contact with Clark's hands. Paige Bookers, who has a basketball IQ that verges on precognition, was reading the play. To support the upcoming generation of players on the courts, a hometown basketball great returns to the place where it all began. For her first basketball camp, Paige Bookers returned to Hopkins High School. Launches into a dead sprint. In the passing path, two Italian defenders are in ideal position. That window is closed for 99% of point guards worldwide. The half-court offense is put up when you pull out. Clark, however, is blind to closed windows. The retreating defender physically falls while attempting to stop the ball as she threads an impossible needle with such speed and accuracy. Bookers finishes with ease when the ball settles in their stride. Basketball is more difficult when Paige Bookers and Caitlin Clark are on the court at the same time. The clinic is offensive. The numbers are truthful. Let's present the last statistical argument. Because the figures generated in this game are so dominating that they almost seem ridiculous. Additionally, they must be heard again by the coaching staff, loudly, plainly, and without any diplomatic softening. In 22 minutes and 27 seconds of action, Caitlin Clark concluded the USA vs. Italy game with 12 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds. She had an 80% field goal percentage of 4 out of 5, including 2 for 2 from the free throw line and 2 for 3 from three-point range. For the game, her actual shooting percentage was 102%. For those who are not familiar with analytics, let me clarify what that means because it is crucial. Field goals, three-pointers, and free throws are all taken into account when calculating true shooting percent. A true shooting percentage of 100% indicates that you are maximizing the value of each and every possession by scoring at a mathematically perfect rate. Clark was over 100. In the strictest sense that the metric permits, she was flawless. The theoretical maximum for an average score was exceeded by the value she was producing per possession. That's not typical. That is not a good thing. In competitive basketball, that level of offensive efficiency is unacceptable. But the figure that ought to be displayed on the wall of every coaching office for Team USA? The plus-minus is highlighted in red, circled 3 times, and examined before to each lineup decision. Caitlin Clark was the best player on the team at plus 27 at the end of the game. In a game that the